working on an MFA in fiction. She lives in Oakland with her wife, 2 cats, 4 chickens, and about 10,000 bees.
Fellow bee areas.
Long live the bees!
Right on. Hi everybody, thanks for coming. And thank you VelRo, whoever you are. This story is called 8. Maman tenait Henri est mon petit frère. Il pleut constamment, toujours pleut Henri. Maman me dit, allez s'asseoir avec papa sur l'autobus s'il vous plaît. Vite, allez. Mais quand j'ai trouvé papa, il était avec ses amis. Ah non, Étienne, il me dit, allez avec maman, d'accord? Allez, vite. Je suis descendu de son bus, et puis tout le monde était parti. Eh bien, voilà. I thought we'd never get them out of here, Calvin said. It was decent of you to open up, Ed said. Well, what else could I do? They were running out of gas. They'd be stranded. Still, it was wicked decent of you, said Ed. I suppose, said Calvin, eyeing the chessboard. Whose turn was it? Let's see, said Ed. You went, then I went, then you went, then I went, then you went. Is that right? I don't remember with all the commotion, Calvin said. Why don't you just go? Okay, if you say so, said Ed. I'm going to grab a Dr. Pepper. Do you want one? Why not, Calvin replied. Calvin has worked in Nabinach General Store all his life. His grandfather opened the store in 1891. After Calvin's father died, Ed came in to help him out. This is going on 42 years ago. People either got Ed or they didn't. Calvin couldn't imagine a world without him. For years, Nabinach General Store was the only store for miles around. It had the town's only public telephone. Now, Calvin found himself looking for vendors for things he didn't even know what they were. Pokemon, cards, scrunchies, flash drives. Used to be folks wanted food staples, wool socks, and axe handles. Was he really that old? What would become of this place after he's gone? Who's the little fella sitting by the magazines? Ed asked, returning to the chessboard with the drinks. What little fella? There's a little fella sitting by the magazines. There is. Calvin walked down to the magazine rack. Sitting on the floor was a young boy flipping through a Spider-Man coloring book. Hey there, little fella, said Calvin. Where'd you come from? Have you ever seen him before? Calvin asked Ed. I don't recognize him, said Ed. Ah, geez, said Calvin. You don't suppose the Canadians left him behind, do you? Ah, geez, that would be terrible, said Ed. Hey, buddy, said Calvin, bending down to the little boy. Where's Mommy? Mama? The child looked up. He had break-your-heart blue eyes. Je ne sais pas, he said. What do you say, Ed asked. I don't know. I think it was French. Ah, geez, Ed said. He's away from his mother. He started to tear up. Ah, geez, Ed, Calvin said, don't you start blubbering up on me. I need you to stay sharp to help you figure this out. Sorry, said Ed, wiping his face with his sleeve. It's just so sad. I wonder what his name is, Ed said. What's your name? Calvin said to the child. Name? Do you have a name? What's your name? What's your name, little buddy? Said Ed. Can you tell us your name? Name? I have an idea, said Calvin. He pointed to himself and said, Calvin. Then he pointed to Ed and said, Ed. Then he pointed to the boy, expectantly. The boy looked at him but made no reply. Then Ed pointed to himself and said, Ed. And pointed to Calvin and said, Calvin. And then he pointed to the boy and raised his eyebrows. The light went on in the boy's eyes. ATM, he said. ATM? Calvin said. That can't be right. That's what I heard, said Ed. What the hell kind of name is ATM? I don't know, said Ed, shrugging. It's French, I guess. ATM, said Calvin, shaking his head. That's just wrong. I'm going to call Peggy. She speaks French. Peggy had known Calvin and Ed all her life. She spoke French because she had always intended to live in France. But she ended up marrying Dwight because he asked her to, and lived with him in Boston until he was killed in an accident. Then she moved back to Vermont and gave piano lessons and became the secretary at the Congregational Church. Now, she lives alone in the house she grew up in. When Peggy arrived, she looked at Etienne and then at Calvin and Ed. What's going on here? Who's this? His name is ATM, Calvin told Peggy. Oh, it's so foreign, said Calvin. Say, how's about we call him 8? 8, said Ed. I see what you're doing there. I like it. 8. Hey, 8, she said to him. Okay, Peggy said, tell me what's happening here. We think this little guy got left behind when a couple of busloads of French Canadians tore through here an hour or so ago, Calvin said. An hour ago? Yes, said Ed. Q was just finishing on the radio. Anyway, said Calvin, we think that's how he got here. We just found him in the back of the store. He doesn't speak English. We think he speaks French. I like that show, said Ed, even if it is Canadian. Peggy sighed. She loved Calvin and Ed like family, but lately she's been wondering whether the store is too much for them. Have you called Cyrus? Peggy said. We were trying to get some information out of the boy, said Calvin. Ask him where his mother is. Oui, maman, Peggy said. Je ne sais pas, said Etienne. What do you say? Said Ed. I don't know, said Peggy. I thought you spoke French. That's what he said. He doesn't know where his mother is. I'm calling Cyrus, she said as she pulled her phone out of her purse. Honestly, guys. Cyrus was the police chief of Navinach, as his father had been. He was also the chief of the volunteer fire department and tree warden. His wife, Dorothy, taught math and driver's ed at the regional high school. His oldest son attended bar in Rutland. His youngest boy was in Afghanistan. Evening, fellas, Cyrus said as he walked into the store. Peggy? Cyrus? Peggy said. The last time Cyrus had seen Peggy was nearly a year ago when she brought her mother, Agnes, in to complain about the Dynasty auto sign. Agnes claimed that when the trees were fully leafed out and you were driving south on Church Street, the sign read, Nasty 2, for a good 2-car length, and she didn't think that was right. Agnes had passed since then. Cyrus couldn't have done anything about the sign anyway. Peggy, New England poster girl, crusty, capable, lovely like a forest. He had known her all his life, but that day she couldn't even make eye contact. It was sad to see the way Agnes was going. It must have been hell for Peggy. Man, did he have a thing for her in the 9th grade. You have a missing child, said Cyrus. Here he is, said Calvin. He doesn't look missing to me, said Cyrus. His name is ATM, said Ed. We might call him 8 for short. He's missing his parents, said Calvin. He got left behind, we think. That's not good, said Cyrus. Hey, little fellow, he said to ATM. How you doing? He doesn't speak English, Peggy said. He's from Quebec. I see, said Cyrus. How'd he get here? Bus, we think, said Ed. By bus. Okay, so tell me what happened, Cyrus said, opening his notepad. Well, Calvin began, mostly we get your busloads of foliage folks and your busloads of skiers. Your foliage folks tend to be seniors and are mostly interested in the restrooms and postcards, maybe some maple sugar candy. The ski folks are often college kids. They stock up on Coke and snacks. They try to buy beer. I always check IDs. These buses were different. First of all, they were school buses, not your usual tour bus. 2 busloads of hockey-playing, French-speaking Canucks and their families on their way back from tournaments in Massachusetts. Young guys missing teeth, their women, and bunches of little kids. I had already started to block up, but the bus drivers pleaded with me to stay open. One of them was almost out of gas. There's not much between here and Burlington. Tim Parker had to close his place in Willoughby, said Ed. And that's 20 miles, as you know, said Calvin. 22.8, said Ed. It was pandemonium when they hit the store, Calvin went on. Everyone wanted to use the restroom, grabbing Pampers, snacks, beer, everyone jabbering at me in French. It was crazy, I tell you what. They no sooner landed on us when they cleared out. I stepped above those damn Canadian pennies, too. Cancer, whispered Ed. Hell of a commotion. It reminded me of when the lesbian folk singers bus broke down on the way to Montreal during that storm. They thought they'd missed their show. 05, was it? 07, I think Ed said. The twins? Well, Ed, how many lesbian folk singers do you have come through here, said Calvin. Ed pondered this. It was a difficult question to answer. Anyway, Ed continued, it all happened pretty quick. It was definitely 07. Said Ed. And then we found the boy. Uh-huh, said Cyrus. And what time was this? Just after 7, Calvert said. Vermont Edition had just come on the radio and said, Jane Lindholm was asking for advice about her jade plant. And when did you find the boy? About 7:30. Called Peggy when we realized he didn't speak English. What is a jade plant anyway, asked Ed. I thought jade was a stone. Do we know his name, Cyrus asked? Like we said, ATM, 8 for short. Peggy rolled her eyes. His name is Etienne, she said. Etienne Devois, he's 4. He lives in a town called Notre Dame de Montpensier. His mother told him to go sit with his father on the other bus. His father told him to go back and sit with his mother. He was returning back to the bus his mother was on when both buses pulled out and left. He came in here and started looking at magazines. He didn't know what else to do. Okay, said Cyrus, tapping his notebook with his pen. I think this is one for the state police. He hasn't done anything wrong, said Ed. To help us find his hoax. Cyrus walked out to his car. Like most people in town, he used to wonder what the deal was with Calvin and Ed. The two were up together constantly, neither one had ever married. But now that both men were in their 70s, Cyrus, like everyone else in town, had ceased to care. It's good that everyone has someone, Dorothy had said. Cyrus couldn't disagree. Abe gave a full-faced yawn. He looks like that boy in the book, said Calvin. What book, said Ed? The book about the boy. Little something. Stuart Little, said Ed. No, Little Man, no, the Little Prince, said Peggy. That's it, said Calvin. You're right, Peggy said. He does. I wonder what it would be like to have a child around here, Ed said. I think it would be nice. Oh, for Pete's sake, Ed, Peggy said. We can't keep him. Ed shuffled his hands into his pockets. I know that, he said. His own little brother Peter had been about the same age as Abe when he drowned in the duck pond, leaving Ed an only child. Ed was 7. That was the same winter that his father and the Presbyterian minister had built a boat in the basement of the church. Ed spent a lot of time in that basement watching the boat be built, mostly because his mother was too sad to have him around. When the boat was finished, it was too big to get through the door. It had to be cut up to get it out. Neither the boat nor his father was ever quite right after that. It seemed to Ed that it was all his fault. He should have kept a closer eye on Peter. He shouldn't have asked so many questions. Thank God Calvin and his family moved into the house next door that summer. He finally had someone to talk to again. Good news, said Cyrus, coming back to the store. There's a state trooper about 15 miles from here. Should be here in 30 minutes. Good, said Peggy, and grabbed a package of crackers off the shelf. Come on, sweetie, she said, and led Etienne to a chair in the back of the store. Peggy took the boy onto her lap and opened the package of crackers. Etienne snuggled in under her breast and put his thumb in his mouth. Peggy felt warmth spread across her belly and up her eyes. She put her nose into his hair and breathed deeply. He smelled both sweet and salty, like fancy candy. She couldn't remember the last time she got a small child on her lap. She could tell that he was sleepy. Well, of course he would be. It must be closing in on 10 o'clock, poor monkey. Peggy remembered getting separated from her own mother during a shopping trip to Burlington when she was about the same age as Abe. Initially, it wasn't so bad. There was a lot to look at. But when she realized that her mother was truly gone, she cried so hard that she wet her pants. The people who came to rescue her were so nice, and in reality, she was separated from her mother for a little over an hour. But it felt like days. It felt like she would never see her mother again. Is that how Abe felt? Nothing bad is going to happen to you, she said. Abe took his thumb out of his mouth. Nothing, he said. The crunch of gravel outside announced that the state trooper had arrived. Evening, folks, said the trooper as he walked into the store. I understand you have a lost child. That's right, said Calvin. I had just started to close up when that young couple, left. I just started to close up after that young couple left when the Canadians showed up. Was he a beaver, by the way? Calvin asked. I don't know, Ed said. He looked a little old to be a beaver. How old are you when you get out of high school? Around here? 20. Well, then maybe. He was with that Martin girl. She's a beaver. She can't be more than 16. The state trooper was tired. Vermont was a small state with few roads, and on most of them you couldn't drive past above 40. It took forever to get anywhere. He was calculating his long drive home from Nabinaj. He had spent most of the afternoon helping to dislodge the carcass of a moose calf from the axles of a semi. Then he chased down a guy for out-of-date tags who turned out to be a toothless crankhead who pulled a gun on him. Now this, beavers, he said to Cyrus, what the hell are they talking about? I thought you had a lost kid. Beavers is what we call our local high school kids, Cyrus said. Beaver Creek Regional High, we do have a lost kid, and I don't know what they're talking about. I'll go fetch the boy. Cyrus went back to get Etienne. He was sitting on Peggy's lap eating goldfish crackers. Cyrus could remember when his own boys were that age. So sweet. They stayed that way for about a minute. How could those Canucks be so careless with this child? Dorothy kept their boys under constant surveillance when they were little guys, and they lived out in the country. Of course, it's not so much human predators. A parent had to watch out for the natural hazards, the creek, the ridge. How the boys love to play in those areas. Kids just gravitate towards danger. Maybe the boys will settle down soon and give Dot and me some grandbabies. Wouldn't that be something? If Stevie is here, Peg, said Cyrus. Okay, said Peggy. Allez, chérie, she said to Etienne. L'homme qui trouvait maman et papa est arrivé. D'accord, said Etienne. What's his name, the trooper said. ATM, if you can believe it, said Calvin. We call him 8, said Ed. Peggy shook her head. The state trooper looked at Cyrus. I have all that here, said Cyrus, waving his notepad. I'll give it to you. The trooper took out his phone and took a couple of snaps of ATM. Okay, here's how this works, he said. This goes out on the wire, you give the boy to me. I take him back to the station, we assign someone from Child Protective Services to look after him. We find the parents, we reunite the family, provided, of course, there's no neglect involved, nothing criminal, you know? How long does all that take, Calvin asked. Well, his folks are probably in Canada by now. I'm about 90 minutes from the station, so a while. Do you have to take him? Can he stay here with us? Asked Ed. When you say us, who are you talking about? Said the trooper. Me, said Peggy. He can stay with me. The trooper looked relieved. I am authorized to permit that, he said, provided that you pass a background check. Okay, said Peggy. Name, address, and social security number? The trooper asked. Peggy obliged. Are you a convicted felon? No. Are there any outstanding warrants for your arrest? No. Works for me, the trooper said. The kid can stay with you until we locate his folks. How long do you think it will take to find them, asked Ed. To find them, probably not very long, said the trooper, but getting them back together, that's another story. We'll have them here by morning, most likely. Okay, that's fine, said Peggy. He's exhausted. I should take him home and put him to bed. Good idea. Well then, I'll call this in and get things in motion, the trooper said, moving to leave. Thanks, said Cyrus, shaking hands with him. No problem, the trooper said, glancing back at Calvin and Ed. Make sure the kid stays with the lady. Oh, don't worry, I will, said Cyrus. Do you have any kid pajamas, Peggy asked Calvin. Of course, said Calvin, we have everything. Let me just look. What size is he? 4, I expect, said Peggy. Is that how kid sizes work, asked Ed? Same size as your age? Pretty much, said Peggy, until a child is about 12. How do you know that, asked Ed. Peggy didn't know how she knew that. Everyone knows that, she said. Ed nodded. Makes sense, he said. Etienne, you're coming home with me until we find your parents, Peggy said. D'accord, said Etienne, and he put his hand into Peggy's. At 7:30 the next morning, Etienne was sitting cross-legged on Peggy's living room floor, eating a bowl of oatmeal and watching cartoons when Cyrus called. How are you? Cyrus asked. This took Peggy aback. Fine, she said. How's the boy? Cyrus asked. He seems fine, said Peggy. Does he miss his mother? He doesn't seem to. Cyrus paused. Do you miss yours? Yes, said Peggy. I heard things were pretty bad at the end. Peggy hesitated, then replied, they were awful. I had to tie her to the bed to keep her from running off. That, and from hitting me. Did your brother ever show up? No. I'm so sorry, Peggy. I know. No, I'm really, really sorry. I know. About everything. I know, Cyrus. I know. Cyrus let several moments pass. We located his parents. They're on their way down. Good, said Peggy. Can you have them at the store around 10? I can, said Peggy. Good. See you then. See you, said Peggy. Peggy brought Etienne back to the general store at 10. He was wearing an oversized Beaver sweatshirt and carrying the pajamas that Calvin had given him. He looks like one of us, Ed said. God help him, said Peggy. Is there any coffee? A state police car rolled into the general store parking lot just after 10. The officer was not the same one as the night before. Etienne's mother was overcome when she saw him and held him close and sobbed. His father stood back a bit, looking chagrined and sheepish. Both of his parents looked exhausted. His mother ran over and hugged Peggy, thanking him profusely in French. Then she did the same with Calvin and Ed and Cyrus. Ed began to tear up. Tell her we're very glad we could be of help, Calvin said to Peggy, and that everything worked out okay. Peggy said all this to Etienne's mother and then bent down and kissed the top of Etienne's head. He grabbed Peggy tightly around the waist. Chérie, she said, rubbing his hair. Ed was visibly weeping as Ed began to walk away towards the police car, holding his mother's hand. Buck up, Calvin said to him. It seems as though all their lives Calvin had been telling Ed to buck up. The truth of the matter was that Calvin was quite moved by Ed's emotionality, the same way he was taken by Ed's inquisitive nature and his general goodness. Always has been, always will be. It's so sad, said Ed. When he got to the police car, Etienne let go of his mother's hand and turned and waved to everyone. Bonjour, little buddy, said Calvin. Au revoir, said Etienne. What do you say? Calvin asked Peggy. Goodbye, that's what I said. No, said Peggy, you said hello. Au revoir means goodbye. Reservoir, Calvin called out. Etienne blew the group a kiss. Then he and his parents got into the back of the police car. As the car pulled out to Main Road, the group waved. Ed wiped his face with his sleeve. Calvin was always so together, so confident. He could make Ed feel both silly and safe at the same time. Considering how things started for him and how they turned out, Ed figured he just might be the luckiest guy in the world. Where would he be without Calvin? Ed watched the car drive off and whispered through his tears, Reservoir, buddy. Reservoir.